What's one piece of advice you would give to somebody with large ambitions, maybe in the entertainment industry or any industry that maybe you've learned throughout your career?
Well, I used to ask that question of CEOs who came to visit at where I went to school.
Yeah.
And the advice that I got fell into three buckets. The first was work hard. There's no substitute for hard work, especially at the beginning of a career, because what's going to distinguish you from the people you're sitting next to? You probably have the same backgrounds and the same intelligence levels. You don't have any experience. You don't have a track record. The only thing that will distinguish you is hard work. And go the extra mile.
Yeah.
And I know how hard you work. And in the beginning of a career, there's nothing but that. And over time, as you gain experience and expertise, maybe you can add more balance into your life. But when people say to me, like, how is it that you have so much balance? I'm like, I didn't have any balance in my life when I was starting out in my 20s.
Yeah.
Sure, as I built a business, I had the opportunity to have a bit more balance. Even now I work really, really hard.
Right.
And I like to do so. So the first is work hard.
Yeah.
The second is listen. You know, you wouldn't know it from this interview, but you would know it from knowing me.
Yeah.
You know, I consider myself a really good listener.
No, definitely.
And
yeah.
I really care what other people have to say. And we're taught as children to be good talkers. Like we're taught to be eloquent, to stand up in front of the class and present, but we're not really taught to be listeners. And it's amazing what you can learn when you listen. And if you sit in a group and step back, just pay attention, you'll see that people are interrupting each other all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listening is an incredibly powerful skill in terms of actually learning things, connecting with people. And in negotiations, it's a really powerful tool.
Yeah.
I mean, in a negotiation, one of the best things you can do is just sit back and listen and let the other party speak and let them tell you what it is that they want, what's important to them.
Yep.
And you know, you may have a much better shot at meeting their needs in a negotiation if you listen first, as opposed to just blurting out what you're trying to achieve.
Totally.
So listen. And then the third piece of advice is never compromise your integrity. Ultimately, it really is the only thing you have. And
couldn't agree more.
I wish I could say I'd never compromised my integrity in my career. It's not true. I have flaws and I've made mistakes, but I try really hard not to. And I've learned from those mistakes. And I'm known as a person of integrity whose word is his bond.
Yep.
And I can be relied upon. So those are the three pieces of advice I generally give people. The broader piece of advice is, and you and I have talked about this, is think about what you want long-term. You know, we all, you know, human beings believe that what's going on now will never change. Like, this situation will never change. This political situation will never change. This economic situation will never change. But the truth is that everything changes. Everything changes. And we change. And you're not going to stay this age any more than I am.
Yep.
So think about where you'll be in not tomorrow, not next week. Don't think about your first job out of school. Think about what you want to be doing both personally and professionally in 20 years and drive toward that goal. That's much more likely to benefit you than thinking about what the highest paying opportunity is right as you get out of school.
Yeah.
Your first job out of school is never going to matter. I mean, except that it's on a pathway to where you're trying to get to.
Yep.
So I always encourage people to think about their goals, truly about what they want long-term, both personally and professionally, and don't substitute other people's goals for your own.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And especially on the listening part, because the first time I met you, like, I remember leaving thinking, wow, like I actually felt, you know, heard and listened to. And I really appreciated that. And that seriously stuck with me. Like, I remember thinking that, you know, on the way home, I was like, you know, he really took the time to hear me out. And I really appreciated that. So I love all three of those points. I guess that leads me sort of into my next question, but you kind of already answered it. What's the greatest piece of advice you've ever been given by somebody?
I would say it was the three sort of pieces of advice that I repeated. They came from three different people, or multiple people.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure anyone ever gave me advice to think long term. I think that came about because I was, you know, I've always read a lot of biographies, and including biographies of U.S. presidents, and I've always read a lot of history. And it occurred to me that the factor most highly correlated with success was knowing what you wanted early on. As long as you define success as fulfilling what your dreams are.
Sure.
Like if you define success as my goals for you, well, that makes no sense.
Yep.
But if you think about what success really means for you, then knowing that and driving toward it is the factor most highly correlated with getting it. It's not education. It's not brains. It's not luck. It's knowing what you want. And if you really take a look at like the most successful business executives or politicians,
yep.
many of them came from nowhere. Most of them came from nowhere.
Yeah.
Most of them, we all start in the same place, but they were driven by a goal.
Yeah.
And that's the most common factor I found among successful people.
How do you define happiness? And follow-up question behind that, do you think you found it?
I'm a pretty happy person. I'm happy most of the time, certainly not all the time. How do I define it? I mean, the nature of, your daily life in terms of both, what I do professionally and my personal relationships. So what makes me happy is, it's tempting to say, well, my wife, my kids, and my friends.
Yeah.
But the truth is, being engaged in business that I really care about matters too.
Yeah.
Doing well financially, even though it's sort of a silly goal, it does matter to me. I like performing well.
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't have a zillion material things, but I have a nice life that my career has afforded me.
Yeah.
And that doesn't change everything. If you're an unhappy person, having more toys is not going to make you happy. But if you're a happy person, then being in nice places, that's a nice thing. So I think it's partially your wiring. Lincoln famously said, and I'm going to get this paraphrasing.
Yeah,
said, I think every man is about as happy as he decides to be. By the way, Lincoln was not a particularly happy man by all accounts.
Yeah.
He was depressed a lot of the time. But I kind of agree with the sentiment, which is, defining what you want and trying to get what you want, living the life that you want. These are all choices
sure.
that, many of us, not all of us, can make. Some people don't have the choice. Some people are born into situations where they just have no options. And, following their bliss means putting food on the table.
Yep.
But many of us have the luxury of choice. You have the luxury of choice. And I was blessed with the luxury of choice because I had a good education and a good
yep.
family backing, and I was able to go out and think about what it was that I wanted. So I pursued that. And I think happiness comes from having agency in what it is that you want in life and knowing what you want, being thoughtful about it, not letting life like kick you around, but rather saying, this is the kind of person I want to be. This is the kind of career I want to have. These are the kind of relationships I want to have. And then acting in service of those goals.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. And so you would say it's important. It's kind of hard to really figure out what would make you happy in a sense.
Well, if you don't know, then that's okay too.
Yeah.
But you'll hopefully learn through trial and error.